What's up guys, and welcome back to the Drift Games vlog. Very special episode today because my brand new car is here in Moorfield Motors, as you can see, surrounded by some awesome JDM metal. There's amazing cars here in stock at Moorfield Motors, but my car is over there. It's out of shot, you can't see it, and we will be revealing it in this episode later on. But I thought it would be an interesting episode to talk about my journey in cars, from my first car all the way up to this one, which is one of my dream cars. We have 60 cars to get through, so I'm going to sit down and it's going to be an interesting trip down memory lane. Before I sit down and talk about cars, I want to show you this one. This is kind of the one that got away from me. This is not my new car, but it is for sale here at the moment in Moorfield Motors. It's an E92 M3 V8. And it just got me thinking about my list of cars that I've owned, because I've owned a lot of BMWs over the years, but I've never owned one of these. So this is definitely one that got away, but if you guys are interested, this car is selling at a very reasonable price at €19,950 for the spec that it's in. And remember, these are only going up in value, so get on this one quick. So right, let's sit down, let's talk about my car history, and let's reveal the brand new car that I will be driving, not daily, and you'll see why. Let's go. All right guys, we got a long list to get through, but I want to just give a little bit of a backstory. I've had to write them down because I can't even remember most of them, but I've had to write them down. I'm going to ping through them pretty quickly, but I want to give a little bit of a backstory to this, that when I grew up, I didn't have anybody around me that was into cars. I was the only one. It's just something I randomly picked up as a kid. I was collecting Matchbox cars. I had hundreds of them all over the house. Started reading magazines when I was like 10, 11, 12, Top Gear magazine, Review magazine. So I didn't have any influence in real life of cars. Everything was coming from, you know, magazines, computer games, Gran Turismo, that kind of stuff. A lot of you guys are probably the same. But I didn't really have a particular genre or style of car I was into. I just loved cars. I could appreciate kind of all types of cars. So that's going to make a little bit more sense, and I had to say that before we get through this list. Now, out of shot, right here, is my brand new car. I know for a fact, some of you are not going to care. Some of you are going to think it's the wrong choice. Some of you guys are going to say, I've no interest. And I completely understand that. It might be totally unrelatable to what you guys are into, but it is one of my dream cars. It's also the most expensive car I've ever bought. And I think it ticks every single box of what I've learned about cars for the last 16 years. And in the last 16 years, I'm going to discount vans and some really bad stuff that I didn't keep very long. I can't remember a lot of it, but I can kind of remember 60 cars, so I'm going to fire through them to kind of give you an idea of the random selection of stuff I've had. So I can kind of say, with experience, I've kind of lived and owned all these cars, so that you guys can say, okay, he might know what he's talking about when it comes to a full wide range of cars. So let's go. I'm going to be embarrassed by this now for a lot of it, so let's go through it. So first car, 20 years of age. I had a Fiat Punto van. It was the cheapest thing to insure in the world. That's why I had it. It went on fire. Let's not talk any more about that. Italian cars, God, terrible. Next up, I had a Rover 45. That I turned into an MG ZS. We'll also not talk a lot about that. Then I had a Civic 1.4, two-tone, shark wheels, amp subs, max power, all that jazz. I then built from scratch an import MX-5 NB 1.6, made it with 18s and made it look mad. Actually looked quite cool. I think at the time, it's still alive out there somewhere. Then I had a Ford Fiesta while I was building the MX-5. And then I had a Mitsubishi Mirage, orange Lamborghini doors and amps and all that kind of jazz. It was big fun at times. Swapped that then for a Mitsubishi Legnum VR4, which is the 2.5 V6. That was the first fast car I had. The only reason I could get insured was because the insurance company didn't know what it was, and they thought it was a Mitsubishi Galant Estate, but it was 280 horsepower. I swapped that for my first AE86 Corolla, which was like a sparkle, glitter paint, black Levin booter. Loved that car, had a lot of fun in it. Then I swapped that for an R32 four-door with an RB25. I changed the color, did a lot of stuff with that. Then I had a Mazda RX-7 FD. Then I had a BMW E36 M3. It was a non-Evo, very, very nice car. I then got rid of that and bought, for some reason, a Toyota Altezza. After the Toyota Altezza, I had a Subaru Type R in black. Then I had, at some point, an MG ZT. We'll never speak of that again. I had a PS13, which became quite infamous on the internet. It was decked on Racing Heart wheels and a juice box feature at one point. PS13 that ended up going to France, I think, in the end. Then I had two R32 Skylines. One was silver and I used it as a drift car. The other was a white road car that I used for drifting because it had some damage. Then I had a BMW 740 V8 for the road at one point. Couldn't afford the tax, got rid of that. Ended up with a Silvia S15. Then the S15 I traded in for a Honda S2000. After the Honda S2000, I ended up having an Evo 7 or S. I swapped the Evo 7 RS for an R34 four-door Ken Nomura Tokyo Auto Salon, ex-Tokyo Auto Salon car, which had an RB26 GTR engine in it. A really, really cool car. I then got rid of that because unfortunately I was doing a lot of DJing gigs at the time and I couldn't fit my equipment in an R34 four-door. I couldn't even get out of my car park, the car was so big. I ended up with a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I then couldn't sell the Jeep Cherokee because it was a bit odd and somebody traded me in an MGB Roadster in cash for it. I swapped the MGB Roadster, which was like a late 70s restored one, for a 2002 Toyota Corolla four-door hatchback, which I swapped for a Nissan 180SX 1Via, original 1Via from Japan. Think of that. It's a bit insane. I then had a BMW 325 convertible. I then bought a Nissan 180SX, which was cream, which I took on track, and the wheel came off, and just a picture of it on forklift in Mondello. Still a very cool car. I had a Nissan 200SX at some other point here for drifting as well. I can't really remember. Then I bought my first drift car, which was an S14 with 400 horsepower. That was an SR20. I then needed to tow that car, so I bought a 92 Toyota Hilux Surf automatic. Then someone tried to rob that, so it was out of commission for a while, so I had a Nissan Almera on the road for a while, which I still think is one of the best cars I've ever owned. It was like a 96 Almera silver four-door. They don't make them like they used to. I then got rid of that because it was so old, and I bought an Opel Astra. It was like an 07 Opel Astra for a while. Then I sold my S14 drift car, bought a 350Z drift. It was actually a road car. I built it into a drift car. I think it was one of the first 350Z drift cars I'd seen in Ireland. Then I started taking over championships and stuff, so I needed something a bit more practical for towing and space. So I had a commercial Mercedes ML for a while. I also had a promotional truck, which was a 1986 or 8, I can't remember, Chevy C 1500 pickup truck that I had on 26-inch wheels, which also had a Mercedes E-Class diesel engine. Don't ask me. Then I had an A86 S2000 powered car, which I bought for my brother for a while, but then I swapped that for a car I had for a number of years, which was the A86 built by Group D, which was an SR20, about 400 horsepower. I had tons of fun driving that car. On the road, I got rid of the ML, I bought an Audi A5, it slipped the timing chain, it blew up. Then I bought, what did I buy at the end of that? I had an MX-5 NA at some point with a big wing there that I was driving around for a little while. I then bought another 180SX drift car, which was eventually became the winner's car from the Pro Drift Superstar competition, which Ryan, who's our fabricator, ended up winning and getting him into drifting. Small world. I also had a smart car because Josh had moved over from the UK. I decided to buy a car that was just really funny to look at Josh driving, so I bought a smart car. I thought he'd wear away with the novelty of that after about 2 weeks, but he actually drove it for like nearly 2 years. After the smart car, what did I have? I sold the A5. I bought a 350Z high rev for the road. This car had a number of different wraps. It ended up rocket body with big works wheels and a big Country Labs spoiler on it. That was a really, really cool car. Ended up selling that as well. Had a Nissan Navara for a while that had IDC on the side of it. And then I got my first ever new car, which I took finance on, which was my Ford Ranger, which we made look all cool and stuff. And then I ended up with the Ford Mustang RTR just after that. That was a three-way split. So my Corolla ended up going to Sultan Al Qasimi, who you guys know what the cool Aston Martin drift car. And then his car ended up going to Danny Neville, which was a 180SX. And then Danny's car, which was the Ford Mustang RTR, ended up coming to me. Don't ask me how all that worked. It kind of worked out in the end. I ended up with the Mustang and the Ford Ranger. I then bought a Chevrolet Caprice, which was an ex-wedding car. Not actually sure why I bought that. I ended up making it look like a lowrider. It's now sold. A bit sad about that, but I'm not sure why I bought it, what I was doing with it, but I liked it. I liked American cars. Then I had Peden Nielsen's old 180SX, which Gavin Lenihan had back in the day in Pro Drift days in Ireland. Then Peden had it, then I had it. We refreshed that car. It became the purple and blue car that I ran for the last 2 seasons. Whew, we're getting there. Then I sold the 350Z that I had on works wheels and all, the Rocket Bunny, and bought a pretty fresh BMW 318D as a daily. I had that car 3 weeks and I got bored of it. Then I swapped that for an E46 M3 supercharged car with a Rocket Bunny kit or a Pandem kit on it. And then I sold that, actually swapped that for another drift car, which was David Dunn's ex car, WKD Imports car, and I made that into the bash car. So I had Peden's car, which I turned into my competition car. I had David Dunn's car, which I turned into the bash car. I still had the Mustang and I still had the Ranger. At that point, I then got a van to tow the cars because there was so much parts. I then traded in the Ranger, got a Porsche 911, one of my dream cars, and I still couldn't believe I owned it. Loved every minute of it. Had that car for maybe 2 years, put a kit on it, wrapped it, loved it. But it was an 06 and it was getting kind of high in mileage, so I kind of said, look, It's getting a bit long in the tooth. It's probably worth a good bit of money now. It's not going to be worth it if I keep driving it. So I ended up trading that in and buying a BMW M4, which you guys will know is what the whole point of this video is that I've sold the M4 to buy this car that you can't see. Then I had a Golf GTI at one point for some reason. Actually, the Golf GTI is one of the best cars I've ever owned, by the way. But I then let my girlfriend drive that for a while, and then we ended up selling that, and I ended up with... Oh, I won the Toyota Corolla A86. That was last year during lockdown. I won the 86. You guys know that from the channel. That was like an unbelievable thing that happened. I then took the money from the GTI, bought an Silvia S14. It needed a bit of work. It needed a bit of paint. We put a kit, wheels and stuff on it. You guys saw it on the vlog. But then when I went to insure it and tax it, I realized for a car that was sitting in the shed that I wouldn't drive all the time, like the tax was declared with an RB25 on it. So the tax was like crazy and the insurance was crazy. So I said, there's no point in having that. So I sold that. And with the money from the S14, I bought the Mazda RX-7 FC. We did that car up. And then at that point because it was obviously last year was a little bit tougher financially for everybody, driving the M4 every single day was just eating petrol constantly. So I decided I needed a more practical car for every day. So what I did was I sold the RX-7. I bought the Golf van, the infamous Golf van that I have now, and then I also bought the Toyota Soar. So that was both of those cars were kind of out of the RX-7 cash that I got. In the middle of all this, I bought a Chevrolet Corvette, but that's a story for another day. And if you want to know anything about the Corvette, there's like hours of footage on Game Changers of us messing around with that. So you can go over to the other series we do and check that out. What's up guys, I'm jumping in and give a big shout out to one of our partners here at Drift Games, one of the teams behind the teams, which is Link ECU. Now this is the new G4X from Link ECU. This is what will be going into both of our new drift cars. This is the greatest thing that you can put into your performance car or drift car. Look, Josh built an engine, a 1.6 stock block MX-5 running 310 horsepower. And on the first day it was about to blow up like everyone would. But this little baby basically said there's something wrong here and shut the car down. Well, at least we have an ECU that can figure that out. So smoke your tires, not your engine. Get onto the Link ECU website, check out their G4X range if it's available for your road car or your drift car, and join us on track and stay on track with Link ECU. I would say that brings us to the end of the story. I've kind of owned, I'm gonna close the laptop now and take a breath because that was long. So I've owned a lot of cars, 60 vehicles, probably adding in vans. I think I had a Range Rover Sport and other stuff in there as well. Probably 70, 80 cars. Now the reason that I'm telling you about all those cars is a lot of those were very bad decisions. I bought a lot of cars that were bad and spent a lot of money. Out of those probably 70, 80 cars that I've owned in my life, including the 60 vehicles that I remember, I've probably lost money on everything bar 2 or 3. So I have been spending pretty much all of my income for 16 years, all of my spare income on cars. I love cars, so that's fine. I don't mind doing that. But what I've learned is that a lot of people on the line and on the internet drive very few cars, and they have big opinions on cars, of what's a good car, what's a bad car, what you should buy, what you shouldn't buy, and they've never driven them. So I think I've driven a lot of cars in my life, and I've lived with them too, which is most important. Because some cars, you get in and you drive them around the block and they're so much fun, but then after about 3 weeks, you're like, this car is a ball ache to live with. So after all of those cars, I had to sit down and go, if I'm getting rid of the M4, it's going to be me jumping into my most expensive car I've ever owned. It's going to be a car that I don't need to drive every day because I have the Golf van. So I want it to be a car that just has pure driving pleasure. And that is a combination of the things that I like in a car. So what I wanted. Now I know when I reveal this, you're not going to be happy. The reason being is that you probably don't know what it is. You've probably never driven one, and you've probably never thought about owning one, like many of the Japanese cars we've had on this channel. But I've done my research and I think this is my perfect car. And I'm going to explain that to you when I show it to you. So take your last guesses. What do you think it is? We've had a lot of guesses on social media. Not many of them have been anywhere close. And that's the list I just showed you shows that it is very hard to predict what I'm going to buy next. So without further ado, this might be the only time you ever see this car. It might be the only time it's on the channel because it's not good for views, but it is the car that I want to drive every single weekend. And it is a 2015 Porsche Cayman GTS. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. not what you thought. You maybe thought of GTR, C63 AMG, or S6, all that kind of stuff, but I'm going to tell you why I bought this car. When I'm doing my research to buy a car, I then go on the internet, like you guys do, go on the old YouTubes, and start looking at the reviews from respected journalists of the cars that are released. This car, no one has ever spoken highly or as high of any new car as they did about the Porsche Cayman GTS. And what does GTS mean? Well, this car is the last of the great Porsches, in my opinion. This is a 3.4 litre, naturally aspirated, manual, 350 horsepower car. Unlike the 911, which has the engine sitting right back here, this is a mid-engine car, so it has the engine sitting right in here. Meaning the handling is absolutely out of this world. It's like a go-kart to drive. 50-50 weight distribution, then you get big, huge brakes. You get 20-inch with the GTS, you get 20-inch forged alloys, you get smoked tail lights, you get this nice side vent which is functional into the engine. You get smoked headlights at the front. You get this cool black lip at the front, which actually is something that a lot of us would do on our other cars, but this actually makes it look really aggressive from the front because it's all black and white. The color for me is absolutely perfect. It has got a retractable spoiler on the back, but you can leave it up all the time, which is really, really cool. Even more impressive about this car is the interior. So for this being a small sports car, it's actually really roomy in there. Like even I think a 6'5" person could sit in this car and get a nice comfortable driving position. The driving position is excellent. It has got jazzy red seat belts, not essential, but they look cool. And the full interior on this car is fully spec'd. So you get leather on the door, Alcantara on all the door, Alcantara on the dash, Alcantara on the gear stick, Alcantara on the seats, Alcantara on the roof, and a leather dashboard. So the whole interior just feels like a special place to be. Even the key matches the car, which is just so cool. There's a couple of interesting things about the Cayman that is a little bit different. So obviously on a 911 you have no boot, but in this car you've got kind of two boots. So you have the back here, which is like enough for a backpack or two, or the old shopping from Aldi, just about fits in there, and you can put a bit of storage there. And then at the front you have another boot, essentially, which is a different part of the key, which is a much deeper boot, which, as you can see, has the original stereo in it and all that jazz. This car actually has a Bose sound system with an uprated subwoofer, which I just got working today. Has an amazing sound system, has all the jazz, has HID headlights that turn around the corner, all the modern stuff, you know, cruise control, everything you could possibly want on it. The car is a modern car. Like, this to me is the best of all the cars that I've owned. It's small and nimble, very like the MX-5s or the S2000s. It handles like the 911, even maybe better than the 911 I had. It's got a good punch, good power, so maybe not as much as the M4, but it's much quicker, or it feels much quicker inside. I mean, you gotta remember, this is a very beautiful car that is faster than an R34 GTR. And that's what makes these cars, these modern cars, so great, because every time they brought a new model out, it got faster. So this is a 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds, maybe less, 4.2 seconds. Grips up really, really well. Like in the M4, it would just spin wheels for days. This thing, you can just rag it down the back road, revs out to like 7.5, 8,000 RPM. It is amazing. But there's one thing that sells this car to me more than anything else, and that is how it sounds. And that's part of cars now, with everything going electric and everything sounding the exact same. And you know, this thing sounds ridiculous. So I'm going to do a cold start, then I'm going to end the video there, and I'm going to let you guys make the decision. I decided to show you this car, more so for the history of my car history than what my new car is. But if you want to see more of this on the channel, if you want to actually see us do some stuff with this car, let us know in the comments. If it's not your thing and you have no interest, I completely understand. It's not what you were raised on. You were raised on GTRs, you were raised on Chasers and Skylines and all that kind of stuff. So this is something that's not even on your radar. But from my perspective of having so many different cars, this is just a feat of engineering. This is a very well-rounded car that I just turn around and look at every single time I walk away from it. I think it turns heads, it goes fast, it handles amazing. It's got all the modern stuff in it. It wasn't cheap, but you get a lot of car for the money. And the good thing about these cars is they depreciate quite heavily at the start, so I've done well there. So I'm going to start this car up on a cold start. Tell me what you guys think. And if you want to see a full road review or a track review on the car, let us know in the comments. Sports exhaust on. Are you ready, Blaine? Ready? Here we go. It sounds incredible. And that's just the cold start at 2,000 RPM. wait till you hear this thing out on the road in a future episode. All right, guys, if you like the car, if you think it's cool, let me know in the comments. I'm absolutely chuffed with it. I can't believe I found one in Ireland in the exact spec I would spec it from the factory. And I hope you enjoyed the car history. It's a bit random. Just thought you guys might like to know it. And thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. Leave us a comment, leave us a like, let us know what you think. Did I make a massive mistake or was it a good buy? But it's a good buy for me. We'll see you on the next one.